At Växjö Cathedral, a runestone names Toki with the word víkingr, apparently letting one Viking identify himself. The inscription known as SM10 is genuine Viking Age evidence, yet its single word answers less than expected. It does not announce a Viking nation, list an ethnicity, or describe every Scandinavian person. Instead, Toki's memorial opens a narrow path into how labels worked around the 11th century. Runologists read the carving through letter forms, language, grammar, and comparison with other inscriptions. The stone preserves a public commemoration created by people connected to Toki, not a private autobiography. Even so, the term shows that víkingr could identify a person without being merely a modern invention. The crucial question becomes what kind of identity that word expressed. Old Norse distinguished the masculine noun víkingr from the related feminine noun viking. The first could name a participant, while the second could refer to an expedition or activity. Someone might go on a Viking, making the label closer to a role than universal ancestry. Its exact etymology remains debated despite confident popular explanations linking it to bays, districts, or rowing shifts. Early usage commonly points toward maritime raiding, piracy, or armed voyaging, though meanings varied by context. It was not the ordinary collective name for all inhabitants of Scandinavia. Old English used the related word Viking in texts concerned with hostile seaborne groups. Foreign observers also employed broader terms translated as Northmen, heathens, Danes, or other situational labels. Those names reflect the observer's language, knowledge, and political problem rather than a perfect ethnic census. An English writer might call attackers Danes, even when a modern historian would hesitate over their precise origins. Frankish annals could emphasize northern origin because fleets arrived from beyond familiar political frontiers. Irish sources developed their own terminology for groups whose alliances and origins changed over time. Eastern texts used names including Rus or Varangians in contexts that cannot simply be replaced by Viking. Each label selected a relationship visible to the writer. None proves that travelers introduced themselves everywhere with one shared name. Runestones offer evidence closer to Scandinavian acts of public naming. Most commemorate kin, state who raised the monument, and record inheritance, travel, service, faith, or death. They mention fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, brothers, partners, landholders, retainers, and regional connections. Some name destinations such as England, Greece, or the East without calling every traveler a Viking. Christian crosses and prayers also place many commemorated people within conversion-era identities. A man could be remembered through kinship and religion, while an overseas career remained only one part of his life. SM10 is striking precisely because víkingr is not the routine label on thousands of memorials. Scarcity does not make the term unreal, but it blocks claims of universal self-identification. An Uppland runestone remembers Assur as a defender of the land against Vikings. Here the word identifies a threat to a Scandinavian community, not a united Scandinavian people. The contrast prevents Viking from meaning simply one side of a modern North versus South map. Scandinavians could face maritime raiders and describe defense against them. Activity, allegiance, and circumstance mattered more than shared northern origin. Calling Toki a víkingr may therefore honor, identify, or characterize a maritime role. Calling Assur an opponent of Vikings marks duty within another local political relationship. The same vocabulary could distinguish people whom modern illustration places in identical costume. Unfortunately, inscriptions rarely explain the social tone carried by each word. Víkingr might convey danger, achievement, occupation, or reputation differently across speakers and situations. Grammar narrows the possibilities, while intention remains partly inaccessible. Later, Old Norse literature expands the vocabulary but introduces chronological distance. Sagas were composed in medieval Iceland after many events they portray. They can preserve linguistic practice and cultural memory without serving as direct transcripts of 9th century conversations. Poetic language may be older in parts, although dating and transmission require case-by-case assessment. No saga scene should be used as a recording of how one historical crew introduced itself. The texts confirm that Viking words remained intelligible, not that they named a timeless people. Personal identity could instead begin with kin and place. Runestones repeatedly organize memory around relationships because inheritance and reputation belonged within families. Regional names also mattered across landscapes that modern states later absorbed. People might be associated with Jämtland, Gotland, Öland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, or other changing territories. Such terms did not carry exactly the borders or national meanings they possess today. Political allegiance could shift as kings expanded authority and claimed wider communities. Language likewise varied before standardized Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish existed in modern forms. Norse is now a useful scholarly approximation, but it was not a universal passport category. A runestone's cross could publicly align a family with Christianity, while local custom retained older elements. Royal inscriptions announced power and achievement, sometimes expressing political ambition rather than neutral description. Occupation, legal status, gender, age, and freedom further shaped how others recognized a person. An enslaved captive transported north did not gain the same identity options as a wealthy expedition leader. Women traveled and migrated, but víkingr is grammatically masculine and cannot stand automatically for every traveler. Children born in settlements abroad inherited local circumstances unlike those of the founding crews. The modern capitalized label Vikings compresses all these positions into a convenient caste. Historical period names created another source of confusion. Viking Age is a modern analytical term used differently according to region and research question. People living within it did not know that a named age surrounded them. Likewise, Byzantine subjects did not experience themselves as supporting characters in someone else's Viking saga. Period language helps organize scholarship, but it must not become evidence for medieval self-consciousness. Archaeological exhibitions face this problem whenever one familiar word must guide visitors through diverse material. Using Viking broadly can aid communication if its artificial scope is explained. Using lowercase Viking for rating activity preserves a useful distinction, though scholarly conventions vary. No capitalization rule can recover exactly what each medieval speaker meant. The evidence instead supports several levels of answer. Yes, forms related to Viking were available to people during the period. Yes, at least some Scandinavian inscriptions applied the personal term in commemorative contexts. No, Vikings was not the established collective self-name of everyone from Scandinavia, nor did it define a biological population, unified nation, or permanent profession. Many people now displayed in Viking museums would rarely, if ever, have gone on a Viking. Others might have joined one expedition and later lived primarily as farmers, merchants, settlers, or royal followers. The label could switch on with an activity and fade when circumstances changed. That flexibility also explains why external sources seem inconsistent. Observers named whichever origin, behavior, religion, or political association mattered during an encounter. One fleet might contain participants whose local identities disappeared from the chronicler's account. A settler's descendants could adopt language, Christianity, and loyalties that made Viking increasingly irrelevant. In the East, Scandinavian origin became only one element within mixed river societies and political formations. Across the Atlantic, Icelandic and Greenlandic Norse communities developed identities rooted in new places. The modern word follows all of them because historians value a searchable umbrella. Historical actors had no reason to obey that later catalog. Returning to Toki, the carved word remains unusually direct. It survives because stone endured, while most speech and wooden inscriptions vanished. That preservation bias may conceal other uses, but absence cannot be filled with imagined declarations. Another discovery could materially improve the answer. A securely dated group of inscriptions using the term across ordinary social contexts. Such a group might reveal whether víkingr appeared beyond commemoration, conflict, or exceptional reputation. Until then, two interpretations deserve space beside the stone. One emphasizes an occupational or activity-based description rooted in maritime violence. The other allows that repeated activity could harden into a meaningful personal identity for certain men. Both fit Toki better than treating Viking as his nationality. Assur's memorial then supplies the necessary counterweight because his community defined Vikings as people requiring defense. Together, the stones preserve a label crossing admiration, danger, action, and opposition without naming a single people. Some Vikings could call themselves Vikings, but most Norse lives never needed that word as their defining name.